Yuba-Sutter.live's local government live streams are presented by Plumas Lake Self-Storage in Plumas Lake, where lifelong local residents are helping other residents keep things safe, providing indoor storage units, outdoor RV and vehicle parking, moving supplies, and Penske truck rentals. Details at plumaslakeselfstorage.com.
Communities who fell into hard times or endured other difficult situations that carried them into homelessness, and that it often takes the strength of the entire community to help them regain hope and independence. And whereas it is important to educate the public about the many reasons people are homeless, including the shortage of available housing for very low-income residents, and to encourage support for homeless assistance service providers, as well as community service opportunities through mentoring and relationship building. And whereas the people of the city of Marysville recognize that homelessness continues to be a serious problem for hundreds of individuals and families in the region, and that we as a community cannot stand idly by as long as this struggle continues. Now, therefore, it be proclaimed, the Marysville City Council hereby joins in recognition of Homelessness Awareness Month and encourages all citizens to be aware that many people do not have housing and need support from residents, as well as private and public service entities. And this is for you. Thank you.
There we go.
Hi.
Make sure he has a microphone.
Could you repeat that?
I will say that this is the biggest and best proclamation I've received. So out of the 5 that I've gotten so far, so unless Sutter County comes through next week, you guys are in the lead, just so you know. So no pressure there, Flores. But if we have not met before, my name is Johnny Burke. I'm the executive director for the Sutter Yuba Homeless Consortium. I don't have much of a voice tonight, so I will work very hard to make myself clear. I appreciate the opportunity to be able to present before the council and just share some things about the consortium, some statistics from our point in time count this recent January, and then our new local homeless action plan and where we're going with different things. So if you don't know, the Homeless Consortium serves as which is a HUD designated term. It basically is the entity that receives federal funding for the area. HUD developed this program many years ago when they decided that it was difficult to ascertain what kind of work was being done in an area by the applications that came to them, since they weren't really boots on the ground. So they came up with this program called the Continuum of Care program, where there would be entities in various counties and large cities across the nation that would be able to make the best decisions for funding. And the Sutter Yuba Homeless Consortium serves as a continuum of care for our area, which means that we handle most federal and state funds that come through our area and coordinate, work together with different programs to achieve the goals that we're working on. You can go to the next slide there. So the things that we oversee, we manage those funds, like I mentioned, and the state of California jumped on that program years later, and they often fund through the continuums of care rather than a direct entities for many of the funding programs they do. So we manage those funds and send those out to different agencies doing the work. We oversee the homeless management information system, which is where everyone is recorded in and where all of our referrals are done to the area for shelter and housing and any services, and allows us to be able to report to HUD and the state of California statistics and the things that are going on. We oversee and coordinate with the coordinated entry system, which here in Marysville is over at Life Building Center on F Street. And so, and that's a big part of what we do. And the last thing we do is really collaboration. We work together with so many partners in the area, including the city of Marysville, to be working on different goals. Can shoot to the next one. About coordinated entry, if the council or members of the public are not aware, coordinated entry is designed to be a one-stop shop to assist people that are experiencing homelessness or are at risk of, imminent risk of being homeless. So Life Building Center on F Street, I am so sorry. I sound terrible tonight. I apologize. It looks like I won't be hitting karaoke tonight. So
Hang in there. Hang in there.
So coordinated entry is designed to be a one-stop shop where if someone, I've got some water, thanks, Stu. If someone is experiencing homelessness, you would direct them over to Life Building Center, and there they're going to sit down with an intake worker, and they're going to start to ascertain what are the things that this person needs to start to put things together to be able to achieve stable housing. And so they're going to start with simple questions. Do you have an ID? Do you have food resources? Do you have health care? Then they're going to work into questions about what kind of things are you dealing with? Are you dealing with any mental health issues? Do you need to see anyone from behavioral health? Are you dealing with any substance use programs? Problems? Are you looking for a program for that? Are you looking for shelter? Are you looking for housing? And so the coordinated entry system is designed to refer people to all the different agencies that do the work that can assist them through that. And that's what coordinated entry does. Our area, although I would say just like most places in California are underfunded and under-resourced, I'd put our coordinated entry system up against anybody's in the state. We have an amazing partnership with all the agencies in the area and all the municipalities to be able to connect people to services that are available. So if we go to the next slide, you'll see those are a ton of the partners that we deal with. And you'll see the city of Marysville's logo prominently on there. And you'll see all the municipalities represented, as well as all the other different agencies. So when I stand up here and say that as the Homeless Consortium is doing these things, I'm referring to everyone that you see on those slides and others. And because these are the folks that are doing the street level work, the direct client relations that are out there every day in and day out, that are meeting with people and helping them to get their lives back on track. So let's talk about the point in time count that we did in January. Go ahead and click the next slide. Thank you. So point in time count is something that HUD has required for many years, that you do every 2 years. You attempt to count all the sheltered and unsheltered individuals in your area that are experiencing homelessness. And so we do this the last week of January. We did it this year in the last week of January. And what we did was we went out several different days to count, because the point in time count is a snapshot. It's designed to find out truly in a point in time, can you ascertain how many people are experiencing homelessness on that one day? So I believe our day was Sunday, January 21st, if I remember correctly. So Monday we went out in Yuba City and in Marysville, had teams go out and tried to encounter every single person we could that appeared to be homeless or was at one of the shelters or at one of the coordinated entry sites or wherever. And then a couple days later, we went out unincorporated in Sutter County, and the next day we went out unincorporated Yuba County. We had over 100 volunteers. Some of you helped out with that, and it was just amazing to see how many people came together to go out and do these surveys to meet with people. And so then we began calling. We had 2 more days to call. And so the question for everyone is the same. Where were you? Where did you stay on the night of Sunday, January 21st? And so if the person said I was in my car or I was outside, any kind of place that we would be considered unsuitable for human habitation, that would be an unsheltered homeless person. If they were in a actual shelter or maybe a municipality paid for a motel or something like that, then they would be considered sheltered. If they were what we call doubled up, or they were couch surfing, or maybe they paid for a motel for themselves for that night, but normally they're homeless, then they fell into our precariously housed category because HUD does not recognize that as a recognized homeless category. So you see the numbers in the center of the screen there, the total number of people that we counted through both counties was 963 that were HUD defined homeless, which means place unsuitable for human habitation or in a shelter, or fleeing domestic violence for that matter too. And then we had another 250 or so people that were precariously housed that we came up on that probably go to coordinated entry, or we saw on the streets that you and I would look at and say, you're homeless because you stayed in a motel last night, but you only had, $100. Somehow you scraped it and you had one night of hotel stay, or maybe somebody let you sleep on their couch last night, whatever the case might be. So when you look at that precariously housed number, that's not an exact number of the number of people who are precariously housed in our community. That's just the folks that we ran into while looking for people who are directly homeless. And so we always like to add that number in because it's important, because if you look at the number and say, oh, we had 963 people. Well, really, truthfully, we had over 1,200 people, but HUD just doesn't define some of them as being homeless. But you and I know that these are folks they're precariously housed is homeless. So that's the overall numbers for our area, which includes Yuba County at 545 homeless persons. I want to go to the next slide. Couple of comparison things. If you are a person who looks at numbers year over year, which is a great way to analyze things, we had a big difference in our point in time count in 2021. So when we look year after year, we see kind of a big spike in 2021, and it looks like we went down in 2023. But then you see asterisks on the 2021. And the reason for that is in 2021, in January, we're experiencing a big COVID surge at that time. The whole nation was. And so HUD allowed for us to do what was called an alternative data set exemption. Instead of going out and doing surveys with people and finding out information about them and getting all their relevant information, they allowed us to submit the information from our homeless management information system, which for us, you can't do a one-day snapshot. You can only run active clients, so it's a 90-day window of people. So from 2019 to 2021, it looked like we had a 46% increase in homelessness. We did have an increase. I can't tell you what the exact amount is. I think at that time it was probably between 8 and 10%, but I can't show you conclusively that. What I liked about 2021 was we were starting to get to real numbers. Here's the number of people active in our system over a 90-day period rather than just a snapshot. So we were pretty happy with 2021 because it seemed like we were actually getting down to a more realistic number of how many people in our area that we're assisting. But this year, HUD said, nope, that was a COVID-only thing. You're back to going out on the streets, doing the surveys. And so our number's a little bit down from 2021. So really the most accurate comparison is to look from 2019 to 2023, and you'll see the rise in our area, which is no different than the rest of the state of California and most of the nation for that matter. And you'll see that both counties definitely went up as well. It wasn't Yuba versus Sutter. Both counties increased during that time. Go ahead to the next slide, please. A couple of things on our point in time count, just wanted to point out, and you have a copy of it there. You can look at it, and please do contact me if you have any questions. There's a lot of different things you look at and go, what are all these numbers, and what does this mean? And I totally understand, and I don't want to take up too much time tonight. So they only gave me 2 hours, so I really want to make sure I maximize that time. But when you look at the graphs, if you see green, it's Sutter County. If you see blue, it's Yuba County. So I imagine for City of Marysville, for the most part, you're probably looking at the blue numbers. But this slide here shows our total number of persons unsheltered and sheltered. You can see we have far more unsheltered individuals in our area than sheltered. So that points to a need for more shelter beds and more housing availability, obviously. If we go to the next slide, this is a trend that frankly, I'm not very excited about. It's a nationwide trend and definitely in California, but our homeless population is getting older, and our boomer generation is becoming the fastest growing number of homeless individuals in our area. And this is terrible because as folks age, you don't want them out on the streets or fighting to survive. We want to take care of our most vulnerable and our aging population. Not that we want young people to be homeless. We don't want anybody to be homeless. But at the same time, we certainly don't want our most elderly population. So that's kind of been an alarming statistic that's been happening for the last couple of years that really nationwide people are realizing that. So I just wanted to point that out as we go through. If we go to the next slide, this is the question that we've never asked before. And this is one that most city councils have been very interested in because HUD really doesn't care what a Marysville, Wheatland, Live Oak, et cetera is. All they care about is what is a Yuba County and a Sutter County. They've never cared about cities, and they don't. But what we care about is trying to get figure out where folks are homeless, where they became homeless, where they consider to be home, so we can make sure we're allocating the proper amounts of funds in different areas to address that. So this year we added 2 questions to our survey that were not HUD type questions. They were questions that we thought were pertinent to knowing more about the folks that are experiencing homelessness in our area. The first question was, what city or town did you become homeless in? And the second question was, what city or town do you consider to be home? Like I said, blue is Yuba County, so you probably just want to look at those top charts. You'll see that Marysville was the top vote getter, if you will, for both where folks became homeless and where they considered to be home. You'll see that between the sheltered and unsheltered population of the individuals we counted, 225 individuals said that they became homeless in Marysville. And when asked, what do you consider to be home, 269 considered Marysville to be their home. So I don't really know how to read that. I will just tell you a couple of possibilities. The first one could be that people are here now and they consider Marysville to be home, but they became homeless somewhere else. Another possibility is that Marysville's always been their home, but they became homeless somewhere else, and that's where they became homeless at, but this is their hometown. It's hard to read because we don't have exact stats beyond that, but Marysville is definitely the primary location in Yuba County where folks have become homeless and they consider to be their home, which might be surprising because we've got a town of 12,000 people compared to Linden, Olivehurst, which numbers are much smaller. So I thought the council would be interested in knowing a little bit more about those numbers. I will tell you that not everyone answered this question. And for some reason, about 300 people refused to answer this question. That doesn't mean 300 people said that they were from another area. They just didn't answer it. So we have no idea for those specifics for those. On the other side of the river, Yuba City was the top getter between the 3 towns and cities there. So I thought the council might be interested because many times when folks ask me about homeless issues, they ask if people are coming here for our services because they know that we have a strong coordinated entry system. And the reality is that the homeless individuals we have in our area are local residents. Whenever we run our stats monthly of new people coming into coordinated entry, the number is always 85% or higher that the folks that we're serving are from this area. And so it's always 15% or lower come from out of area. And so I thought the council would be very interested in knowing about that. And we can certainly talk about any of these numbers at any time that anyone wants to go over any of them.
To the chair.
Go ahead.
If I can, just a quick question
Yes, sir.
on in the Yuba County on these 2 charts. It shows the left-hand chart at 340 total defined homeless, and then on the right-hand chart it identifies 344. So there's like a 4-person difference. Same way in the Sutter County, there's a bit of a difference. I understand some people didn't want to answer these questions, but what's the difference right there between those 2?
That's really it. It's when you're doing these surveys, everything is client choice. It's not like, hey, if you sit down with me and do the survey, you have to answer every single question. You at any time you can discontinue the survey or you can pass on answering a question. So sometimes people are really quirky about that. And because I'll tell you that I was out on all the days that we were counting, I probably did 40 surveys myself. And there was times where I would ask people very, very specific questions about their life. Like you have to ask, are you dealing with any of these conditions? One of the questions is, do you have HIV or AIDS? And someone would tell me, yes, I have HIV or AIDS. And then I ask them, what city did you become homeless in? And they go, pass. And I'm like, so I really don't, I can't explain that. It's really interesting, but people just, sometimes they want to answer some questions, sometimes they don't. So that's the best I can give you. It's just choice. No problem. Okay, we'll keep moving on. So earlier this year, last year we received from the state of California a funding source called HAP Round 3. It's HAP is Homeless Housing Assistance and Prevention program through the state of California. It's the main funding source that's coming to our area for homeless services right now. And we're keep working through round after round. Seems like they announce a new round every year, which is good, that they keep funding different programs and sending assistance. And so when they came out with round 3, state of California decided that every area needed to have what was called a local homeless action plan. Now, we had already been working under a strategic plan called Forward Yuba-Sutter that was adopted in 2019, and some of you were a part of that. It was a bi-county effort with all the municipalities coming together to give a strategic plan for addressing homelessness in our area. And so this plan builds upon that and then went a little bit further. So through the work of our consultants, and a lot of you were interviewed for this, there were some gaps that we found in our areas and some things that we need to address. So on the next slide is the gaps that were found. The first one, the number one, is affordable housing. This is probably no surprise to anyone here. I'm sure the council hears all the time about the need for housing, need for affordable housing, need for market rate. Housing is always seems to be a need in California. We never catch up. Recently, UCSF did a major comprehensive study that everyone was waiting on because they put, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of dollars into consulting. And the big question was like, what's causing homelessness in California? And they found that the number one thing was lack of affordable housing. It's no different in our area. We're still struggling to find affordable housing for people. So that was gap number one. Gap number two was homeless prevention. This is something that we have not addressed very well over the years because there hasn't been a lot of funding for this. So the idea with prevention is, if you look at homelessness on a continuum, there's got to be an entry point where someone enters into homelessness, then they're homeless, and then they exit out into housing. So that opening door is where prevention funds come in. If we can keep people from entering through that door into becoming homeless and keep them into stable housing, then we're going to have a lot less work to do in the meantime, and it's going to cost a lot less. But for years, the different funding sources that we receive haven't really addressed prevention. They've really addressed what I would call the center part of the continuum, which is day services, shelter, things like that, and then a lot of concentration on the exit, which is rapid rehousing and into different housing programs. But prevention has been a lacking source. California really addressed it quite a bit during COVID when they had their emergency rental assistance program to keep people into housing and paying back rents and all those things. But there hasn't been a lot of funding, and so that was one of the gaps that we realized that this is something we need to address a little bit more deeply. The third one was interim shelter. Showed that chart a little bit earlier about how many more folks we have that are unsheltered than sheltered homeless-wise. That clearly points to the need for more beds to be able to put people in shelter. Physical and mental health services. For the most part, I don't think we needed a consultant to determine this for us. If you drive up and down the streets and you see someone's homeless, you can oftentimes see physical issues. You see people in wheelchairs, walkers, missing limbs, a variety of different physical ailments, and you see mental health issues. You see folks that are sitting there talking to themselves or talking to whatever in the case may be. But in that, we have a lack of enough services. We have a great Sutter Yuba Behavioral Health Department, but we just sometimes can't get people in fast enough. We have great outreach teams, but we don't seem to have enough of them, and so that's a gap that we'd like to target. And the last thing is community engagement. We've never done well at this, and when I say we, I'm speaking about the Homeless Consortium, but really two different ways with community engagement. Number one, letting people in the community know that what are the efforts that are being done and how can they be a part of it. So we've never really engaged the community very much, whether it be social media or any other avenues, to really let people know what's being done and how they can be a part. The other community we haven't engaged is actual folks with lived experience, folks that have been on the streets, that have been homeless for any amount of time, into our decision-making processes and planning and all those things. And so this is a gap that we'd like to target. So these are the 5 gaps that we came up with in the plan. So if we go to the next slide, these are our strategies. And so strategy number A is homelessness prevention. I mentioned that earlier. We've really got to close the door to people entering into homelessness. Typically, month after month, when we do our statistics for people that are entering coordinated entry for the first time, we always do our top 3 reasons people became homeless, because when they do their survey and they come into coordinated entry, there's a whole lot of questions asked, and there's all these different boxes you can tag on reasons you became homeless, and you can tag more than one. Typically in the past, number one has always been unable to pay rent or mortgage. It's the most fundamental reason people become homeless. They can't afford to live someplace. Number 2 has usually been loss of job or unemployment. And those two tend to go hand in hand. If someone doesn't have a job, they can't pay for rent. And those two things go hand in hand. The third really varies. Sometimes it's been substance use issues. Sometimes it's been fleeing domestic violence. It's really ranged over time. For some reason in our area, not this last month in October, but for the 4 months previous to that, the number one reason that people were becoming homeless in our area was fleeing domestic violence situations. So that's troublesome. Prevention-wise, we can pay back rents, we can pay back utilities, we can pay for damage to units or things like that to keep people into stable housing. I can't get into somebody's house and do counseling with the marriage relationship to see what's going on. So we're hoping that trend will reverse, and Casa de Esperanza's calls have been up considerably this year too. They're seeing it. It's pretty heavy. But homeless prevention, we will continue to target what we can, which is hopefully paying back rents, keeping people in different situations so they don't have to become homeless. The second strategy is shelter and housing support. Pretty simply, we need more beds for shelter. We need more affordable housing units for people to be able to rent out and live in. So that's pretty self-explanatory for the most part. And there's a lot of programs in the area that are already working to do that. Yuba County has they have a desire to have a large scale homeless shelter. They put out a request for proposals a couple of years ago, and they're trying to develop that to be able to increase the number of beds and increase the number of services. So hopefully that will come about sooner rather than later. We're hoping that some of the other shelters can expand their bed count in the meantime, but most of them are kind of constricted by their physical size. So we'll have to see as that moves on what may become available. Strategy C is homeless and community partnerships. So basically we want to get out more and involve the community and involve voices, both the folks that are have no idea what's going on with homeless services and folks that have been there before and have lived that life and have been a part of that to really educate some of our decisions and look for more community-led projects to continue to work on. And the last strategy is health services expansion. The two primary parts of this would be increasing street outreach and then also develop a recuperative medical facility. So the first one's mobile engagement. If the council doesn't know, for instance, every municipality has outreach teams. So in Marysville here, Marysville Police Department has an amazing community service officer, CSO Rodney, who goes out and one of her primary tasks is interacting with folks that are experiencing homelessness and trying to get them connected to services so that they can move out of that. It's not so much a scram, go to the other side of the river. It's a how can we get you out of this life and continue moving on. And I will tell you, she is wonderful at that. She cares about people deeply, and she's constantly calling me and trying to help people out to move them out of that life, not just move them along. But for mobile engagement, we also have Adventist has a street nurse team. Sutter Yuba Bay Health has the HEART team, which stands for Homeless Engagement and Resolution Team. They also have another consulting team called iCare. And all these different mobile teams are going out with law enforcement and code enforcement to try and connect people to services, especially for people who haven't been coming in. It's really surprising how many people we run into who have never been to Life Building Center, even though it's just a couple blocks away from there they are in Marysville, and they need to get connected to services. We want to increase mobile engagement because we've seen a lot of fruit from that over the last couple of years. And the recuperative location, I mentioned earlier about medical issues with folks, especially physical issues. We run into a problem very often on the street where someone has a physical condition that they need to go in the hospital for. I'll give you an example. There was a guy not too long ago. He had prostate cancer. So he needed to go and I guess have his prostate removed. I didn't get into it too deep with him, but something along those lines. He couldn't just be released out on the street. You can't recuperate from a surgery like that on the street. And he really needed to be in something higher than just a shelter where you're on a cot or something like that. You know, you need some place where you can rest and stay during the day. So basically, he was going to have to go in the hospital and probably stay in the hospital, even though he wasn't sick enough to be in the hospital, but he wasn't healthy enough to be on the street. This is where medical recuperative care kind of fits that bill. We're very excited that Adventist Health has a very noble project called Project Hope that they are planning on doing over at the old Fremont Hospital, and this will meet the need, but they need to gather together the necessary funds to rehab that location. Well, I shouldn't say rehab. They need to destroy the whole lower part, and then they can rehab the tower and build new stuff. So that's going to be a primary focus of trying to find more funds to be able to support that project and any other ones that might go to that length. So that was a ton of information in a short amount of time. I probably went over my time, and I appreciate that. But if anyone has any questions, I'd love to field them now, or any comments. And if it's something I don't know, I got a notepad I'd love to write down and get back to you with any of those.
Yes, Mayor. Hey, Johnny, when you're doing these surveys and you're asking where the client stated they became homeless or what they consider, is this saying that you're having, let's use Marysville, 225? You had 225 encounters with people within Marysville, or they could have been in any of the other areas, but suggesting that
they could have been
homeless here and ended up wherever.
Yes. So of the 963 people that we counted were homeless, 225 said they became homeless in Marysville. Now that doesn't mean we did the survey. I'm answering your question. Okay. That doesn't mean we did the survey in Marysville, because we didn't assume anything. So we could have met them out in Dobbins, Robbins, wherever the case may be, and said, "Where did you become homeless at?" And they could have said Marysville. There was no boxes. It was like, you name the city or town, and then we write it in. So
okay, that's what
it wasn't. There was nothing assumed. So like all the folks that we counted in Marysville, we didn't put down became homeless in Marysville. We asked them. I mean, I had a guy I said, where'd you become homeless at? And he was like, something in Kentucky. And I was like, how'd you get here? And he's like, he was homeless in Kentucky. He came out here for a family member, and that relationship fell apart. And so he continued being homeless. But his answer was not Marysville.
Well, one of the reasons I asked that question is just trying to be fair with what we need to look at is, we get the same thing all the time. Where did you become homeless? Marysville. Well, even to this day, I don't know how many people in the Linda areas that have a Marysville address say they're from Marysville. So I'm just wondering if these are proportionate to actually what we're having happen here.
I don't know, because we've never asked the question before, and we've never gotten zip codes, for instance, for people.
Okay.
But Linda and Olivehurst were popular answers. We had 80-something people say Olivehurst, and you'll see Linda had a bunch of answers. So there were people that knew that area. And I think for the most part, for instance, when I was doing, if I said, hey, where'd you become homeless at? They said, Marysville. I said, oh, right here. They said, well, over in Linda. I go, no, that's Linda. And I made sure I wrote down Linda, because that's a different town. I'm big about, you cross the Yuba River, you're not in Marysville anymore. I don't know why, but people call it still.
Anybody else?
Good, Chair.
Sure.
Johnny, I appreciate your presentation, and you and I talk a fair amount as we see each other in the community and whatnot. But I've got to ask, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask the question. And I know we see millions of dollars going into these programs every year, right? What's your total budget?
So I would say between 3 and 5 million, because we get grants and then they extend out years. And so some years we might have spent 2 million, the next year's 4 million. And,
So, I mean, millions of dollars, we've got a ton of different programs, right? And I believe putting them underneath the umbrella of the Homeless Consortium and everything is good. But year after year, we're really not seeing the radical differences in the homelessness population that I think we're all hoping to see, and definitely what residents are hoping to see. And I'm speaking for both sides of the river, or all three sides of the river, I should say. But I mean, what do you really think? I mean, I understand the reports, I understand what the state's requiring and some of those different things, but I mean, how do we really move that needle?
affordable housing. I mean, I don't know how to say it any more simple than that. For the most part, we have folks that have an income and they just can't afford to live anywhere, but that income, because that income is so small. So month after month, the folks that come into coordinated entry that are new clients, typically for households without children, about half of them, about 50%, have an income, and that income usually averages between $600 and $700 a month. For households with children, it's usually about 80% or higher have an income, and that's about $1,100 to $1,300 a month. So for those that don't have children, that somewhere between that $600 and $700 a month, it gets you nothing anywhere anymore. You know, even with, unless you can have some sort of subsidized housing and be able to put that together.
So what about this population that I mean, I understand more housing. We've seen more housing come in both communities, right? But you know, I hear report after report, even talking to some of these folks that are living homeless that don't want to go in, don't want to do that, right? And that seems like that's an ongoing story that you hear time and time again, right? No, I don't want to go and work through that, you know. The
folks that come into coordinated entry that are new.
2 years ago, we saw
households without children. About half of them, about 50%, have an income, and that income usually averages between $600 and $700 a month. For households with children, it's usually about 80% or higher have an income, and that's about $1,100 to $1,300 a month. So for those that don't have children, that somewhere between that $600 and $700 a month, it gets you nothing anywhere anymore. You know, even with, unless you can have some sort of subsidized housing and be able to put that together.
So what about this population that I mean, I understand more housing. We've seen more housing come in both communities, right? But you know, I hear report after report, even talking to some of these folks that are living homeless that don't want to go in, don't want to do that, right? And that seems like that's an ongoing story that you hear time and time again, right? No, I don't want to go and work through that, you know. A few years ago, we saw a report come through, and maybe it was false hope, but I think we saw like a 14% decline, I think, was, I think, maybe coming right. Maybe I was on the planning commission at that time when we saw some of those numbers, and it was like, oh wow, okay, great. And in this, in this PIT report, right, there was this difference, and so I don't know. I think we're all feeling the frustration of that. I know I am, and so. Anyways, thank you for your report.
I think it's an excellent question. It's one that's being asked at the state. The state's really cracking down to make sure. So, like, one of the state things, this local homeless action plan, they were like, hey, we're going to give you guys millions of dollars for your area. We need to see a plan on what you're doing. And now they've ramped it up. So the next round, HAP 5 that's coming out, they're asking for regional plans, and there has to be benchmarks and programs one of a couple ways. You could pay just someone's deposit to get them into housing. You could pay their deposit first month, second month, and maybe taper down until they're stable. Those kind of programs are expensive, and if you don't do more comprehensive programs, people usually will bounce back out on the streets. So it's a big. Yeah.
There's been significant affordable housing that's come into play, and I understand the argument of that, but really, I think the real issue here is the substances, right? That's one of the biggest issues across the whole population. Right? It is abuse.
Yeah, I would say it's a big issue.
You get people clean, and then they become more and more productive as time goes on, right? So is the state working? I think the real issue here is the substances, right? That's one of the biggest issues across the whole population. Right? It is abuse.
Yeah, I would say it's a big issue.
You get people clean, and then they become more and more productive as time goes on, right? So is the state working on anything significant other than just throwing millions of dollars at affordable housing? Are they working on anything to actually try to deal with the mental health and try to deal with the substance abuse that you're seeing coming down the line?
So mental health, yes, they are. Substance abuse, not so much from a state perspective. We encourage people around here local. We have a program called Start to Finish that is run through Sutter Yuba Behavioral Health, and we have open beds at each shelter that's there. So the needle on substance use stuff. Matter of fact, most state programs are kind of the opposite of that. They go by a housing first philosophy, and housing first, that whole philosophy says that you put people in housing first, and then you work on their stuff. I'm not a big fan of that. I'm more of a shelter, transitional housing, permanent housing. I think that model's worked over time because then you get people accustomed to living, and you start to build in some different things through case management and build them up before they get in permanent housing. But all the state programs, if you receive any state dollars, you have to subscribe to the housing first model, which means that you don't do drug and alcohol testing when people come into different programs. It's behavior based. So some agencies around here will get state funding and we'll work with that. So Salvation Army is a good one. The Depot has a sobriety program over there. So they don't drug and alcohol test people coming in. It's behavior based. But then once somebody's in their program, they agree to do drug and alcohol testing. So that's one way to do it a little differently. Twin Cities Rescue Mission, you have to breathalyze to get in there. They don't take any state or federal funding because they won't drop that requirement because that's a significant part of what they do. So people do different things, but the state's definitely not pushing that substance use needle at all, unfortunately.
Right. I don't know. I just see that as part of the problem, right?
I agree. No, I would say the number one thing I think is affordable housing, but there is a whole bunch of other stuff. That's why those were all things.
Yeah, I guess I see that as part of the problem with the state's solution to fix this, right? Is not dealing with the substance abuse issue, right? Yeah. And not putting more funds and allocating more focus on that. It seems like it enables it to continue to perpetuate. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and I think I think it's swinging back, if you ask me personally, because right now our governor, who's very left-leaning, is pushing for this care court and conservatorship and forcing people into mental health services when before it's always been choice. And he's actually getting some infighting from, I guess you could say, the liberal side of politics against that. Sure. And so I think things are starting to swing back a little bit, but it's taken some time, that's for sure.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You got
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jenny. I've
To
got
the chair.
a couple of questions. Go ahead. No, I go last.
Oh, very good. So, Johnny, thank you for this timely presentation. It's very sobering, and it's a pleasure to work with you.
Thanks, Stuart.
My turn. Johnny, you'd mentioned that the consortium total revenue is in the range of 3 to 5.
Yeah.
What has it been each year the last 3 years?
So it's tough to pin it down because we get a grant, and then you have that grant for several years. It's not just spending in a calendar year. So last year, like, we set a budget for the year, but then we have money that carries over every year. So that's why I say $3 to $5 million, because depending on what time of year and what fiscal year we're on is when money's coming through. So like currently right now, it just really depends on how fast the state moves with HAP Round 5. At one point, we might be sitting on $4 million, and it might get all spent next year, but it's on our books for this year as revenue. It's just deferred revenue.
Thank you. What about other funding? I think I've seen news about Habitat. Do they receive money separate than through you?
Yeah. Habitat's really good about getting different funding sources.
What I'm trying to get a grip on is, say you're 4 to 5, right? Mm-hmm. I'm trying to get an understanding of how much other money is being invested or directed towards the homeless issue in Yuba and Sutter County. So that would include Habitat, yourselves.
Sure.
And where else is that funding coming through? Do the counties step up directly?
Yeah, the counties do definitely do some supporting. I mean, the counties put money into, like, for instance, here in Marysville, over to Life Building Center, they pay some funding to have case management over there and some funds that go into there.
It'd be interesting to know the total.
You know, I have no idea. I've never been asked that before. But
well, it's a dollars thing. I mean, it's like head count and how much is being addressed to each head count. Interesting. I looked at Marysville, so we'll focus a little bit here on Marysville. On this page where clients stating they consider city a home. And in Yuba County, 78% say Marysville. If that's representing all of the homeless, Marysville is only about 14% of the total population of the county. Marysville has 78% of the homeless. And that is a burden on police, fire, ambulance, well, the hospital has to accept from all around. That is a significant burden on Marysville. And then if you take that 78% and multiply it times the county total, that's 425 in Marysville. That's more than all of Sutter County. Marysville has more homeless folks than all of Sutter County. Why are we such a magnet?
So I think,
and forgive me, I have a hard, and this isn't arguing with you, Johnny. You're doing a tough job, and I respect you. I'm trying to noodle through these things. 425 in Marysville. Now, Marysville's only 12,000 people. I doubt all these people sprung out of Marysville. I'd be shocked if they did. So Marysville's something of a magnet. I mean, you look at Sutter, Yuba City, 60,000 people. Sutter County is much larger. Well, it's like 20,000 people more than Yuba County, I think. Round numbers. 100 in Marysville. Yuba County is about 90, right? So, but Marysville is 14% of the county, and we've got 78% of the homeless. Why are we such a magnet?
So the question that you referenced there was, what city do you consider to be home? Does not mean that somebody said that they were living here. It's what city they consider to be home. I think the more accurate.
But it gives. I told you I was looking for something to give me a sense of the number here.
Yeah, so I don't believe there's over 400 homeless people in Marysville at this time. So I understand the way you're kind of, I guess, working out.
So you're saying everybody in both counties, I'm going to stick with my 78%. 78% again yields 425, and there's a lot of homeless in Marysville.
There is.
And I don't see them in Yuba City. They're not as visible, that's for sure. And they're not as visible in the county. You go out into Linden and Olivehurst, you don't see the visibility. Is it there's something that's become a magnet here in Marysville, and it'd be interesting to know what it is.
It's hard to determine. Marysville historically has had homeless. I mean, you guys have grown up here. You know that the old camps that used to be down in different areas, and now you see them more in Marysville because both police and the sheriffs have done such a great job of moving camps off the riverways. And so the waterways, I mean, just a few years ago, pre-COVID, if you went out in the jungle area, the Jack Slough area, at one time there was almost 300 people out in that area.
By the way, all those places are city of Marysville.
Right.
The places along the river and those camps, those were all in the city of Marysville.
Yeah,
and the Jack Slough area in the city of Marysville.
I 100% agree with you. That's why I'm saying you didn't see them before, and now that area is cleaned out, they're still in our area. Like when I said earlier about how the homeless issue is local, people don't really go far. They stay with where they know. They don't really go very far.
How versed are you on the history of funding for the homeless issue? Say, for example, someone told me that the kind of funding going into this kind of endeavor 20 years ago was less than $100,000.
It wouldn't surprise me because that would be...
So here we're less than $100,000 for you, for what you're doing, and now it's $4 to $5 million, so that's 45 round numbers. I mean, 45 times, and it's a chicken and egg question. And this is unfair to you. This is not directed at you, Johnny. There's an underlying problem that you're dealing with, and I'm curious if the question, if you want to see more of something, throw more money at it. Now, throwing more money isn't fair, but put more money into it, and you'll get more of it. And it's interesting to see how that phenomena works. And so, chicken and egg. Are there more homeless because of the money, or is there more money because of more homeless? Which one came first? And it's something I don't think anybody's answered yet.
Well, I think that, like I gave the example earlier, I think UCSF did this huge comprehensive study to figure out what is the major issue in California, and they came up with affordable housing too. But going back, the homeless issue has been rising steadily since the 80s. And the same time where you see housing start to really rapidly increase in California, the same time the mental hospitals were all shut down. A couple of these things coupled together, and it keeps going. It's not just in our area. It's a whole California issue. California has over 33% of the nation's homeless, has over half the nation's unsheltered homeless. We live in a mild climate that people want to be at where they can live outside if they...
Interesting. You look at Florida. Florida has a much lower percentage of total homeless to total population, and they have good weather.
Yeah, I'm not sure I can answer that. I mean, there are different weather conditions come into play. They got hurricanes and stuff there. You know, if we had ice here, man, we'd cut our homeless numbers in half. So that would be a big difference if you look at other places, you know. I don't know how to answer your question much more than that, Mayor. I think that there's some things that I believe that would make big differences, namely affordable housing. And we haven't been able to do that. We
don't have room for much more housing, and we don't want it all to be affordable because it's off the tax rolls.
Yeah. Well, I do understand that concern, and then we'll have to continue to deal with folks until we can figure out ways to put people in housing because they're not going to go anywhere else. So I'm not saying it's a Marysville-only problem. It's a whole area problem. It's a whole California issue.
Marysville absorbs the bulk of the problem within Yuba County. And, in fact, there's more concentrated in Marysville than in any one geographic area within Yuba and Sutter counties. And so it's something we're acutely concerned with. And we're not going to be able to solve it. Marysville isn't going to be able to solve it with affordable housing. And I'm not certain affordable housing is the answer. I think people have dropped out. It's been made easier. There's evidence to support the notion, I should say, that people are dropping out, and there's enough money there to make it easy to drop out and be taken care of. And that's a question that needs to be answered. I'm sorry. Thank you, Johnny. I do have tremendous respect for you, and thank you for being here. I've learned more than I knew before, and I appreciate you being here.
To the chair, I have one follow-up question.
Sure, Jim has a question to follow up too. Go ahead.
I want to go back a minute when when the mayor was asking you about the budgeting, and you said you didn't know what your budgets were the last 3 years. But what you were referring to, which there's a budget and there's a revenue schedules. And what you were saying is that your revenues fluctuate so much. Correct?
Yeah.
But you still have a fixed budget that you put in place every year, don't you?
Well, our
Or you were just working without a budget?
No, we have a budget. It's just that for fixed costs for the consortium, we have very few. We just have a few staff. Pretty much we're a pass-through for a lot of things. So we, for instance, I'll give you an example. HAP Round 1 came out in 2020. We were given $850,000 from the state of California. So for that calendar year, we allocated $300,000 to Habitat for Humanity, $262,000 to regional housing, $100-something thousand to Sutter County. And so some people spent theirs quick. So regional housing was one check that cinched up the Cedar Lane project for them. Habitats used it on their Live Oak project out in the Oak Haven project in Live Oak, so it took a few years to go through. So we set this budget and say, okay, we've got this money, it's going to Habitat, $300,000, but maybe only $50,000 to $60,000 went out that year, and the next year $100,000 went. So what's going in and out, it's probably closer to $2 million depending on the year, and it'll be interesting to see this year what comes in and out depending on when people bring in expenditures. I will tell you that we had one funding source came out in 2021 that we just closed out. It was $3.2 million, so that was over a 2-year period. It varies, so it's hard to pin it down because we set a budget and say, okay, we've got this much, we're allocating this to this program, but they might not spend it all. They might spend 3 years to spend it. So that's why our budget looks a little different. Nothing changes from the staffing level, but that's very small. That's just 3 employees. Does that make sense?
Mr. Shedd.
So my question is related to the number one cause being affordable housing. We just put in an over 70-unit complex. We didn't, but developer.
The East Lake Apartments, yeah.
Yes. And that filled up quite quickly. It's all affordable units. And yet we're saying that that's still the number one problem. Here is my question. If we're at minimum wage is roughly $15.50, I believe right now, that equates to about $2,600, $2,700 a month in income. And our average rent per the document says in Yuba County it's $986. So that may be just barely getting by with minimum wage. I understand that. But when we look at the unhoused population, my question is, what would be considered affordable to the unhoused person with no revenue stream?
With no revenue stream, that's extremely difficult. There would have to be a program that would pay. But I'm talking about the folks that have some sort of Social Security, SSDI, some sort of steady income. They would need something around $300 a month, and that's usually how those programs work. So yeah, it's got to be something that's got to be subsidized. There has to be some sort of tax credit financing for the land, whatever the case may be, so that folks like Habitat, for instance, can make something like that happen.
We're not talking about a wage earner then. We're talking about somebody on some other income, such as SSDI, because a wage earner would earn even minimum wage if they're earning wages in a legal manner, would be $2,700 a month. So we have that many people that are on some kind of fixed income that don't have affordable housing and are unhoused because of that. Is that the issue?
Yes, I'm saying that 50% of our households without children have an income, and for that 50%, it averages between $600 and $700 a month, whatever that income is, and it's higher for households with children, but households without children, and I'm talking just homeless individuals. That's not necessarily somebody who, like your example, I couldn't tell you where their revenue stream is from. They report it to us, but typically it's SSI or SSDI. Something along those lines there. I give you an example over at the Twin Cities Rescue Mission right now. They got 40 guys living there. There's probably 10 guys there who are seniors that have a fixed income, and they haven't been able to make the move from the mission into something like Butte Christian Manor is a great example. Something like that where your rent is based on your income, and you've got to be in the extremely low income. You've got to be 30% of AMI, something like that.
So, and I guess just the last question is, there a large need for affordable housing for those on fixed income that are beyond retirement age? So in the Social Security range of income.
Yeah, I would agree with that. We'd have to really, the best person to ask on that would be the folks that run the Butte Christian Manor. They have, I'd be interested to hear what their waiting list is of folks that are waiting to get in there. I can tell you Habitat for Humanity runs 2 different projects right now they call the Villages. They've got Prosperity Village over in Linda, right next to Walmart. They've got Harmony Village over in Sutter County, about 3 miles south of Yuba City. Both of those are motels that were converted into housing. They're about 60 units each, and they have a waiting list of hundreds of people trying to get in. And those folks that come to them have some sort of income, because you can't get on their list unless you have some sort of income. And they charge, I think it's roughly $300 to $350 a month per person that gets in. And so they have those lists. Buckingham Property Management that leased out the East Lake Apartments and also the Cedar Lane, they said at one point they had a waiting list of over 1,000 people when they were doing both those projects. So, yes, there is a significant there's folks out there. I don't know if they may be doubled up. They might be couch surfing, might be multiple families in one unit, or they might be on the streets themselves.
And I guess I'm just seeing a gap between the affordable housing that we just built, or that was just built, which there has to be a certain level of income for that housing, and those that we are counting in the point of counts that are unhoused. I just don't see how they'll ever be able to get into an affordable home as it's defined through HCD and HUD for the purposes of building those projects. Now, if we're talking about perhaps fully subsidized units, that's a different story. But what we just completed is not going to resolve the issue with the unhoused that I can see.
Yeah, I agree with you. When we use the term affordable housing, it includes everything from extremely low-income housing all the way up to like what the East Lake Apartments is. So any additional amount of affordable housing at whatever level, whether it's 50% AMI, 30%, voucher setup, is going to make a difference, at least for our unhoused population. Well, actually, when East Lake Apartments opened up, we saw a dip in our homeless numbers for like a couple months, and then they slowly started creeping back up again. So I would attribute that to some folks that got in East Lake, maybe were in some even lower, and it opened up. So, it's kind of like a chain, if you will.
Thank you.
Quick question. How and where do you report financial information, your activities?
So, we have to do a 990 form every year. Federally in California, we have to do the same reporting that any 501c3 nonprofit would do. And then we have to, we're in the middle of an audit right now that we have to do a single audit if we receive more than $750,000 in federal funds in a year.
I presume that. Thank you.
And I'm sorry, I don't have the numbers. Maybe I should know it off the top.
That's okay.
I may look a little weak in that. I know a lot about homeless and
we caught you on the fly. Appreciate you being here, Johnny.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Council. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Johnny.
Okay, we now move to the Community and Consent Calendar Forum, and it is a consent calendar, but it's also a community forum, so if there's a topic not on the agenda and someone wants to speak, City Clerk just left the room, but she's the one with speaker cards. Anyway, individuals wishing to address the council concerning consent calendar items or matters not already on the agenda are invited to make oral comments up to 3 minutes. If you're here, get a speaker's card from the city clerk. If you're online, raise your hand, and you all will be recognized in due course. Let's see. You're requested to address your comments to the council and not to the audience. And by state law, and this is just a reminder, council is not permitted to undertake any action or discussion on any item not appearing on the posted agenda. And if you have any documents you'd like to share with the council, send them to the city clerk, 526 C Street, Marysville, 95901. Madam Clerk, do we have anyone wishing to speak?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Our first speaker will be Judy Mann.
Judy, welcome. Judy's my next door neighbor. We are both reside
the whole world.
on the west shore of Ellis Lake.
Good evening. My name is Judy Mann, and I live at 1117 D Street, where Ellis Lake is my backyard. I'm here to say that I am beginning to fear for my life, just walking the streets. So I'm here usually I'm here on a positive mode, but today I want to share what I know. Yes, I know our city lights, roads, traffic, and signage are a problem in our little town. But now I hear of a sewage problem, which I'm not going to go on and talk about. I love Marysville. As most of you know, I try in every way to embrace what you are doing. But on another hand, I also try to enhance in any way I can. I'm accepting changes as they come. I started the walking history tours because I care about Marysville, and I want to share with everybody what we have in our little town. I have been entertaining out-of-town Airbnb guests now for several months, from people from out of town. As far as San Jose, they've been coming here. If you want to plan a walkable place, then we have to work on the appearance of our historic downtown district. Boarded up businesses, closed establishments, homeless in the doorways of empty buildings. It's not a good impression that I want to share with my visitors. That come to our town. Where is the security? I walk all over. I see things that most don't see while they're driving. The recent post on 530 Live is evidence of the street lights not working. Yes, I do understand this is a Caltrans problem, but the city needs to address it to them. On D Street alone, I know that vandalism has been appearing more and more. Just within the last 2 months, D Street home, which was vandalized, which happens to be my son's, an investment he decided to do here in Marysville. 2 cars have been vandalized and broken into, 2 storefronts, windows broken, and a restaurant cafe, which is the one that we go to quite often. These are our establishments on D Street. Our local museum has been targeted twice in the last 2 months. What is this coming to? This is what I see. I'm almost sure more crimes, vandalism have been reported on a daily basis. So I'm here with no solution. I'm not sitting where you are, but I do know that the police is understaffed. I have addressed an issue before with the coffee with the cop, and they promised somebody would come to me. Today, I've still not heard anyone. As a citizen, business owner, taxpayer, who I voted you guys in, maybe some clarification on my end that I don't understand, but the continuous problems occur.
Can you
Please
wrap
make it safe for me and make it safe for my visitors that come to visit here. Thank you.
Indeed, our wish. Thank you. Madam Clerk.
No further speakers, Mayor.
Thank you, ma'am. We now move to the consent calendar, and we have been informed that item number 5 on the consent calendar, am I correct there, Don, has been pulled for separate consideration. All matters on the consent agenda are considered routine and are therefore approved by one motion unless a council member or the city manager first requests that a matter be removed from the consent agenda for separate discussion and action. What's the will of the council?
I'd like to make a motion. Approve.
Second.
Made and second. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Madam Clerk, that was unanimous. Okay, I'm going to wing it on the action calendar. Matters on the action calendar will be considered separately, and the same rules apply for if anyone wants to speak to them. The matter under consideration is item number 5 on the agenda, quarterly investment report for the September 30, 2023, ended September 2023. Recommendation, receive and file the quarterly investment report for the quarter ended September 30th, 2023 for the City of Marysville investment policy. Is Jennifer Stachinski, Finance Director. This is your matter. And if you can speak loud enough, you can get over the train.
So per our investment policy, I do present this on a quarterly basis. I know it was pulled because there was some questions per Councilmember Belzis, so I'd like to open with find out what the questions are so we can address them.
Thank you, Ms. Staginski. I'm surprised we all didn't look on the bottom of our chairs. That train horn went off looking for a special number. But no, the question I have for you in looking through this is really on the back page, talking about the expenditures and the receipts. I noticed that our salaries and benefits is roughly at $2.04 million for that quarter, right?
Correct.
And I noticed that our sales tax receipts is at $1.63 million. The other items on there between expenditures and receipts are pretty close to about a wash, right? But we end up with, roughly this $400,000 difference between those two. And, you and I have had a number of conversations about how our sales tax works, and it's something that's very frustrating to me. But where do we really sit in with that? Are we at a $400,000 deficit in this quarterly financial breakdown? I mean, can you explain a little bit in detail there?
So I just did some very quick research too, just for reference. I looked at the last 3 quarters of reports, and in June of this year, salaries and benefits was 1.92, the prior was 1.94, and the prior was 1.99. So we're averaging about $1.95 million in salaries. There is a bump in this current quarter because that's when all of our MOUs got passed, so that's when all of our increases went in. When I looked back at sales tax, we had the same thing, 1.68, 1.62, and 1.59. So our actual average every quarter is the 1.63. So this is a very consistent track with what we're on. There's not a deficit because another portion of our revenues that come in that offsets this is our property taxes. But since our property taxes only comes in 2 large chunks per year, we do have a part where we do have more expenditures coming out. But when our property tax comes in, that's when we have our spikes. So it offsets it. So we are not running in a deficit. We just actually are receiving our large chunks of revenue on a biannual basis instead of a quarterly basis. So it doesn't reflect in here to offset it. Okay. So thank you for kind of clarifying that a little bit. The other question that I have is looking at the treasurer's report, this form here. Yes. There's about $1 million difference in total cash and investments, and I was looking through the chart in that. Can you kind of elaborate on that as well, if you can? So it appears that there's a pretty significant difference in our cash and commercial checking from 3.5 to 1.5, but then we seem to make that up in the pooled investments based off of the local agency and the what else was the other one I was looking at? The total pooled. But is that really the fluctuation in our total assets over the course of a 3-month time frame? At times it will be. I don't have the exact numbers in front of me because we are working with so many large grants and so many projects. Mm-hmm. We will put $200,000, $300,000, $400,000 out for each month that won't really reflect on when we're looking at this back page and I'm telling you our top 3 contenders,
Sure.
some items won't show on there, but because we have so many multiple grants, we have Gavin Park, we have street projects, we're making payments on those, but they're reimbursable grants. Okay. So our revenue is going, our overall asset is going down right now because we're paying for them because we haven't had the opportunity to submit them to whatever agency that we need to for reimbursement. So
Gotcha.
we're going to see a lot of that fluctuation, especially with the current street projects that are happening in East Marysville. As we start paying for them, we're going to start seeing that same ebb and flow of we're going to go down, and then you're going to see, okay, we're up $2 million. Okay, now we're down $2 million.
I see.
It's whenever you work with large amounts of grants, the assets actually, as Johnny was saying, it's not as stabilized because you're waiting for those reimbursements to come in, and we have to pre-fund all of our projects that we do. We pay for in advance and we're reimbursed. None of the money that the city receives is a $2 million grant that we're given and then we pay after the fact. We pay up front and then get reimbursed.
Gotcha. Okay. Thank you. I appreciate the explanation on that.
You're after me. So, sorry. I didn't mean to make it sound like that. I apologize. So you do have a lumpy revenue stream with the property tax revenue and what have you.
Correct.
Let me suggest in future presentations on receipts, I presume these sales tax are regular sales tax and Measure C.
They are.
I think it'd be very helpful to have those broken out separately going forward. I'm seeing nods around the table. It's a good idea.
100%. Very easy to do.
There we go. Sir.
Well, I have a question that I probably already have the answer for, but how do we manage those cash flows? What money do we use to bridge ourselves between the time we expend and the time we get reimbursed?
So that is done with our reserve. So I forgot the best way to answer this. If we're in between money, we really are using our reserve. So if we don't have a current reserve in place, like say we did a street project for $2 million and we had to upfront it until we got reimbursed, and we didn't have $2 million sitting in our bank account, we would not actually be able to do it. So a reserve is what we use. So if we actually pay for large projects, we're temporarily taking the money out of the reserve to pay for it until it's refurbished with the money that's coming back.
You see, Johnny, even we have troubles talking about the money.
Well, because you don't want to make it sound like we're taking a reserve and taking money out and not getting it paid back. That's why you have a savings account. It's not saying that it's going to be not available at the end of the year. It's just currently being reduced until that money comes back in. Welcome.
Thank you. So let's see, that needs to be voted on, I presume. So does that require a vote? I don't think so. Councilor?
It just says receive.
Receive and file. Thank you. We now move to a public hearing. All matters in this section of the agenda are formal public hearings. There's one item, and will be acted on individually. Members of the public may request to speak, and if you're here, speaker's card. If you're online, raise your hand via Zoom, and you'll be called on in due course. If you have any documentation you would like to be distributed to council, please mail it to the City Clerk, 526 C Street, Marysville, 95901. And we're looking at item number 6 on the agenda, titled Public Hearing for the Submission of a Community Development Block Grant. Recommendation: pass a motion to 1, open a public hearing and receive public comment regarding the submission of a community development block grant, also known as a CDBG, application not to exceed $3.25 million, and 2, approve an appropriately numbered resolution approving an application for funding and the execution of a grant agreement and any amendments thereto for from the 2023 and/or 2024 funding year of the state CDBG program. And our esteemed finance director, Ms. Jennifer Stachinski, is going to explain all of that to us. And it sounds complicated.
Yes, it does. So good evening, Mayor and Council. So to summarize this up, this is a CDBG grant that we have had out for several years.
What are CDBG grants?
So I'm actually going to be doing a presentation in just a moment that's going to answer all of our questions.
Proceed.
So I will get to that. This has come to council in the past few years, but as CDBG releases the funds, every time they do put out a new release, the city has to, quote, reapply for it. So I will explain that in the presentation, but you have seen this before. This is actually the follow-up that allows us to apply again because they just put out the 2023. And with that, we need a new resolution and a public hearing to be able to accept the funds. So I am going to go through a presentation. If you do have additional follow-up questions on it, we do have Beth Dodd and Lori Adams here with Adams Ashby. They are the ones that are CDBG consultants and the one that put this PowerPoint together that I'm about ready to present. So they will have additional. The first thing I do want to say is that when you get the opportunity, there's a sign-in sheet when you first walk in. I'm asking everybody if you guys could sign that, put your name and address, your name and your email address. It's a requirement of the grant. They'd like to see that the public was here in participation, and they also brought refreshments and some snacks out. So please enjoy that too throughout the meeting or after the meeting to take.
They really want you to sign up.
They really would like you to sign up. So we want to make sure that we do that. Okay, so again, this presentation is the information that's required for the conditions of this grant. And there is a lot of information in it, so I do want to let you know that the slides are also available online if anybody in the public would like to look for further detail of what we're going through today. So next slide. Okay, so just the main overall objectives is through HUD, which is the Housing and Urban Development Department, and HCD, which is the California Department of Housing and Community Development. So if you hear me use those terms, those are their official names. So their overall objective is to develop a viable urban communities where local households fall within the low moderate incomes. So as they list on there are certain requirements that need to be met before we can actually use these type of funding. The next slide. So how do we get to where we're at? So our current project that we had was originally submitted in 2019. It was approved, and then it was waitlisted due to all the COVID-based projects that have actually taken priority. So now we're back in this current 2023 NOFA, which is a Notice of Funding Availability. And only those that were waitlisted from the 2019, which was the city, are asked to be applying for this. So no other cities or entities can apply, only those that were waitlisted. For future NOFAs for 2024 and beyond, they'll go back to and open to all the entities within California for eligible activities. So this is purely for the waitlisted project. So our next slide. So what we have here is this is the map of the project that we were brought forth. So this was what was presented, and this is what was approved in the 2019. So this is a $3.25 million street project that the city is planning on doing that will serve 845 people. So I'm just going to give a quick synopsis of what we plan on doing in this area. This information does come from John Mallon, our city engineer. So I'm going to read it off so I say it right. So what we're going to do within this area is a combination of grinding and pavement replacement. He said it's very similar to what we're currently doing on Del Perro and East 19th on those projects. We're also going to do a cement-treated, full-depth recycling and then a thick pavement section, which is very similar to what we're currently doing on East 22nd Street and the project in East Marysville. And then the additional that we're going to be doing in that area is installing accessible ramps on all the corners and replacing damaged and non-compliant curb, gutter, and sidewalks. So the estimated time frame to receive the funding, this 3.25, would be between September and December of next year, 2024, with the hopes that it will go out to bid and we'll actually start be able to work on the project in spring of 2025.
May not have been listening carefully enough. Waitlisted. What's
Okay. So what that is when we applied for the 2019, our grant was actually, or we were accepted, and they were approving our project, and we were going to start the project of being funded for it. COVID hit, and so what they did is they had to reallocate funds. So we were an approved project, but they didn't have the funds for us, so they put us on what we called a wait list. So we've been waiting for CDBG to actually start redoing these kind of projects instead of the COVID projects. So since we were accepted, we've just been, every year we've been kind of pushed off, saying you don't have the funding yet, but when the funding's available, you are automatically on a list to reapply to receive this funding.
Thank you.
Yeah, it was very generous of HCD to actually do this for the communities who were waitlisted. So the next slide. So that is our project. So per the requirements of the grants, we do have to switch to an overview of what CDB does when it comes to community development and fulfilling our household needs. So their items are public services to meet low, moderate income households. They work on economic development. They help to increase affordability for housing in low mod incomes, and also public infrastructure projects. So that's an overarching of what they provide. To the next slide. So our eligible activities under the CDB program, this is as an overall whole, are as follows. I'm just going to do a quick summary instead of reading all these for you guys. But what they have is housing, is rehabilitation, rental acquisition, and homeowners assistance. They'll work on public improvement projects such as wastewater and water. We could apply for things as community facilities such as community centers and food banks. And then they also provide planning and technical assistance for studies that meet the CDBG national objective. So for future years when we go to apply, these are the kind of eligible activities we would have. The next slide also shows eligible activities, but these are more on the economic development side, which would be grants for loans to businesses as listed, because there are several on here. We'll let you review those. And again, over-the-counter projects, which over-the-counter means that they're project-ready, grants for the creation and retention of jobs or low-income workers. So again, all of these have to go into a matrix per CDBG guidelines, and it needs to benefit a community that has low or moderate income levels, which the city of Marysville does qualify for. On to the next one. So another part of being compliant is we have to make sure that we actually have a housing element. We are in compliance with this requirement as we did adopt our 2021 to 2019 housing element in December of 2021. Again, that shows why these kind of elements that we do, like a housing element, why they're important, because they allow us to get future grant funding. Without these, we would not be able to apply.
Can you clarify the time frame for our housing element again?
With the staff reports that I read, said 2021 to 2029.
Okay, 29. Okay.
Oh, did I say 19?
I think you said 19.
Oh. You know, I actually typed that in several times, and my note says 2029, 21 to 29. So I did my research on that one prior to this. And if anybody would like to see it, it's available on our website. So our next slide is I do have a small correction to this, because it does say on there that the city has adopted a residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan. We have this in draft form, and it will be coming to council at our next regular session on consent. So I do want to clarify that that's another requirement of the grant that we'll be bringing forth to council. And then our final slide is just to show the public and anybody else where they can receive more information about fair housing requirements and other additional information if they'd like to know. So with that is an overall, we have our project that we're bringing forth, and then the requirements to the conditions per the grant that we must present in a public hearing forum. And with that, I will open it up to public hearing. Questions to the public.
Just a moment. That presents. Just a minute, I have to dang the gavel. It's now a public hearing. Anybody wishing to speak? Madam Clerk.
We have no speakers tonight, Mayor.
Public hearing closed. Thank you. Just to do that right here. Any comments or questions from the council?
Through the chair.
Sir.
I want to make a statement first and then follow up with a question, probably more directed towards you, city manager. But, you know, we've recently had some projects go underway in which I think all of us have received comments from the public about, even though I know we've been very diligent in including the public and receiving public comment on the projects that we're seeing come to fruition right now. Nonetheless, this is a project that was put together and applied for back in 2019. And I believe that it's pertinent that we keep the public informed about where we're at, what we're doing, and what's happening in a reasonable manner. And so I want to ask, do we have or can we put together some type of an action plan, maybe including some of the points of why this area was selected, when it was done. You know, I'm just kind of reliving the last couple of months of some of the comments that we've all received. So go ahead.
As you stated, this project was delineated quite some time ago.
Sure.
And historically, just to recap, and our consultants are very well aware of this, we started with a different area, but it did not qualify under HCD and HUD rules as far as a disadvantaged tract that would qualify for the funding. We had to switch, and so we selected an area that did qualify. They're very particular about what areas we can. So the funding is limited in where we can use it. Now, we do have another round coming up in January to apply for, yeah, which is a good segue into this. I think we have another round of funding in January, and we have some decisions to make on, you know, what's the next project. And project can mean a lot of different things. It doesn't necessarily have to be streets, and you can see some of those in the slides. We have been discussing internally either another streets project in the same rough area that qualifies, or an economic development related project, and we will bring that to council as a recommendation here in the near future. I would also say that, talking to our public works director and city engineer, we probably want to get in front of you guys the plan for next paving season, because we'll probably have some smaller scale items than the one we're doing in East Marysville, and it sounds like the CDBG project is still 2 seasons out,
2025,
as well as the 22nd Street SACOG project. But we could probably package that all together and make a presentation on what we recommend for the, project and recommend for the upcoming years, if that would be suitable.
I'll make 2 comments. We have recognized the need for the public outreach in these programs, and HCD has provided some additional direction. So we did post notices in the neighborhood and at the park areas around where this project will be occurring for this evening's meeting to help address that. So we are taking efforts to make that a broader outreach to inform. These public hearings are always difficult to get people involved. So they don't get involved until you're actually digging the street up.
Hence my question, right?
Right. So I totally, we understand that, and it is definitely a hurdle that we battle in the 30 years I've been doing this. So,
ma'am, I didn't hear your name.
Oh, I'm sorry. So I'm Lori Adams, Ashby Group. I'm your CDBG consultant.
Thank you.
And then secondly, the 2024 NOFA, Notice of Funding Availability, is expected to be released in January of this year. This particular public hearing, we've included that as a part of this process to ensure that we have more outreach than normal, and took advantage of the opportunity of this public hearing to begin to discuss what some of those opportunities are. The city manager was able to provide some of the details of what is currently being discussed, and we will be bringing forward again another public hearing.
Okay, you got ahead of me.
Oops, sorry.
On to the next one. You can put on the next one. Now, in terms of the outreach here, waitlisted, we're not approved?
So this application process, you are approved as long as you submit your application. So you are not going to be in a situation.
Okay, then allow me. I'm trying to become informed here, and I'm not fully informed yet,
sure.
At least in my own mind. The outreach then that we're talking about now, what's that about?
To qualify under the HUD's regulatory requirements, because this is considered new funding, meaning we applied under 2019, we waited our turn. They've now released a new NOFA to allow us to resubmit the application that's already been approved to access funding. So a public hearing is required in order for us to submit this new application.
I get it. Now, so, but outreach, I mean, you go knock on doors or a press release and then get our good city manager on the local radio station, 93Q. I mean, what kind
Definitely,
of thing?
we have
those
not
qualify?
Yeah, those qualify. We have not addressed that.
So
that's something we could address. We do the press release in the form of a publication in the newspaper.
Let me see if I can interject. The traditional outreach is some type of public meeting
notice,
and then soliciting input in a council meeting or
Correct.
a special meeting of some
Correct.
sort. The other outreaches are kind of bonuses, and I'm guessing that CDBG, as well as many other funding sources, are looking for more community involvement.
Correct.
And so those other options you mentioned are probably going to be occurring.
Yeah, we'll just do your best to inform and get people
the radio,
engaged.
The radio is a
want to
great
get engaged,
suggestion.
Give them a chance. That's the fundamental requirement.
Absolutely.
I've got another question.
Go ahead.
Thank you. I noticed, Madam Clerk, can you put up the last slide? I think it was the last slide in the presentation. No, the one before. There it is. Just a minute. Here we go. There's this requirement, for example. I know this touches on your area of expertise, Johnny, but it says residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan. As part of the requirement, the city has adopted a residential anti-displacement and relocation assistance plan. Anyway, so this is a mandate, correct? That
Correct.
is coupled to this. Now, I'd imagine this kind of mandate could change if there were a change in management in Washington, an administration with a different philosophy, for example.
It could. It would take an act of Congress.
Yeah,
we
don't need to comment. It's just that this is the kind of thing where, here, do this for us while you're doing that. I get it. Okay. And are there any other, have you been around through enough changes in administration to see the kinds of changes that do happen and can happen?
30 years experience in this process, yes. So I've been through multiple changes. They don't make it very far.
So we went from Obama to Trump. That had to be a big difference.
Yeah, well, it goes back even further than that. But they're very bipartisan in supporting the CDBG program. We don't see many changes. We will see some budget cuts, as we have experienced over the past 10 years. But it's a very supported program on both sides of the aisle. CDBG is something that both administrations or all individuals.
So it's more predictable.
Absolutely, absolutely, yes.
Thank you.
Okay.
Very much, sir.
This is somewhat related to Mr. Burke's presentation, and I noticed in one of the slides it says low to mod income. I'm assuming then that this program doesn't help with the extremely low income or the
It
housing?
does.
It
Yes.
does. Okay.
Yes.
Can
We
you explain that?
in our public services section,
Okay,
which is very limited in funding. Unfortunately, it's a maximum of $250,000 for public service, but that can assist homeless. It can do many programs that would be related to his program needs and individuals that he serves.
Does it allow you to build housing for extremely low income?
It does not allow you to build, but you can rehabilitate.
Okay.
You can also install infrastructure in support of a project. So if they had a project that was coming forward that needed to have certain improvements, public improvements specifically, in order for it to be entitled and to be approved, then this program could potentially support those.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. You bet.
Thank you very much.
You bet. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thank you, Jennifer. That's easier. Any other further questions or comments? Noting none, what's the will of the council?
Move to approve.
We have a motion to approve.
Second.
And a second. All in favor?
Aye.
That was all of us, Madam Clerk.
Thank you.
To the chair.
Sir.
I just a quick question. I want to go just address this again on any of these paving projects. And her comment made me think about some of the infrastructure money. Are we making sure with every one of these that we're taking care of our underground as we go? Specifically, I'm guessing sewer, which is on us.
Yes. So, and this may be a bottom line is the last project, the big 3.5 million Measure C, we cambered all the lines underneath and we didn't find anything that needed to be addressed. So we will continue to do that, yes.
Okay.
And we've delayed A Street for that reason.
And we did delay A Street for a Cal Water infrastructure improvement that's needed. They just can't get it done. They couldn't get it done this season, so we delayed it for them.
And I'm assuming then with you saying that we did 14th?
I believe we did do
today.
14th, yeah. Anything that was affected.
Okay.
Okay, noting no further questions or comments, what's the will of the council on this one? Have we done this? Vote? You got that? The other question, it threw me off. My memory's got a half-life of about 5 seconds. Okay, we now move to committee reports and comments. Councilman Belsa.
Nothing to report via committee, but I do want to make a couple thank yous. One, to you, Johnny. I know this isn't an easy task that you're working in, and I just, even though we're asking tough questions, I just want to let you know that I appreciate everything you're trying to do to better this community and applaud you for it. And also, I want to say thank you to our staff. Jennifer, everybody's doing a great job, and appreciate everything that everybody's contributing. And just want to wish everybody a happy Thanksgiving and hope everybody enjoys Turkey Day.
Councilman Gilchrist.
I have no committee reports at this time. In my council comments, I have a question about street lighting. Just a status update on our replacing light bulbs in our city streets, those that haven't been affected. That could help out with safety and what have you. I'd like to thank city staff for the great job with the progress at Ellis Lake. And I'd like to thank the Marysville Police Department, especially Officer Souza and the other gentleman whose name I forget, who apprehended the gentleman who broke into the Marion Museum. Martinez, yes, thank you very much. And there you have it.
Hudson.
I too have no community reports to report at this time. I've seen a lot of good stuff go on in Marysville here the past few weeks, and I am super excited to see roads get done. And, you know, Public Works has been on point. I saw them fix an A Street a little bit today with some patchwork, so that was kind of nice. Code enforcement is a rock star with what that guy does. So The code enforcement came and took care of a couple of issues close to a property of mine that I was already dealing with and didn't want to bother you guys with, but he just happened to show up and handle it and finish it for me. So I just thank him for not letting me be stupider in the situation. And the fire department and staff and everything. Thank you, everybody, for what you guys are doing.
Vice Mayor Buttigieg.
I have no committee reports. I would like to say I'm sorry that I have just missed the Veterans Day Parade. I think I missed a ribbon cutting. I think I missed a grand opening. Unfortunately, I've been down with some medical issues, but I am looking forward to a Christmas parade, and at least 3 of us out there with some decorated mowers. You guys do know the theme, right? Okay,
it's Christmas.
It's a Griswold Christmas, so I want to make sure that we're decorating accordingly. But I'm looking forward to that. I missed riding in a brand new Corvette on Veterans Day, so that was my disappointment.
Let's see. I did participate in the Veterans Day Parade. Councilman Gilchrist was with me. We had our signs on the side of my little car, and we drove around and waved at everybody. The little kids, it's just so much satisfaction. Going out, and then you wave at a little kid, and they just love it. And you talk to them, and a parade is a wonderful thing, and it's an honor to be in one. Can't say enough about what the police do here in Marysville on all fronts. And I've just yesterday at the corner of 5th and J, there was a disturbed gentleman there, and he looked homeless in terms of his stuff around him. And he was surrounded by one of our community service officers and one of our regular police departments. And another one was on his way, I saw as I was driving by. And this poor soul was ranting and raving, and members of our PD were standing there just letting him work it out. And the kind of patience, commitment required to do that job can't be the most fun part of the job. I'm so respectful and impressed. 60 years ago tomorrow, I was in art class at Marysville High School my freshman year. I was in an art class because my left leg was in a cast for a reason that doesn't matter. And my friend John Handy came into the room and shared the fact that the president had been shot and dead. What an event. Some things just never leave you. 60 years ago tomorrow. What a terrible day. Interesting, too. That night at the Memorial Auditorium, which is a beautiful building at the corner of 9th and E, beautiful building. The Beach Boys were scheduled to play. Opened by Freddie and the Statics and Bobby Freeman. Bobby Freeman was famous for one song. This is back in the day when people were doing a song and create a new dance. Mashed Potatoes I remember the line, "Come on everybody, come on in. Bobby's going to teach you how to do the swim." And the Beach Boys, and they played that night. It just hadn't sunk in. You didn't have 24/7, although it was emerging. And that night, that next day, school was out, because that was a Thursday, I think. Next day, school was out. Checked us in, checked us out. And you went home, and everybody was glued to the TV over the weekend and through the president's funeral. What a time. It's worth noting. Madam Clerk, any council correspondence to be aware of?
Not for this meeting, Mayor.
Mr. City Manager, do you have anything to share?
A few. We talked about streets a bit, but we're wrapping up all of the pavement work for the Measure C SB1 projects. They were, I believe, doing 14th yesterday and are really just going to wrap up with the striping and cleanup and everything. So that and that project looks to be coming in within budget, and we did not have to spend contingency. So that's a good position to be in. Ellis Lake treatment occurred. They treated half of the lake, and it looks like the lake is clearing up a bit. Some of that may be just the weather, but I think it's a combination of the weather and the treatment. They will come back in 2 weeks to treat the other part, I believe. So the injection system is in, and when they were out treating the lake, I believe they took samples to see what the phosphorus levels are. We don't have that information yet. Gavin Park, we had the ribbon cutting. We got some feedback, which was welcome. There was a strong sentiment that we needed a slide. I have just talked to Ms. Jessamine today, and it looks like we can install a slide on the larger structure. She's getting prices and lead time on that, as well as prices and lead time on a tot lot for smaller, younger children. 2 to 5 is probably the range. And so once we get the pricing and see where we're at with budget, we'll likely move forward with purchasing those and install them. May not get installed till next spring, just because of weather and lead time on the item. Costco's opening. That's not within our jurisdiction, but that is opening tomorrow, I believe, and that will be an interesting day tomorrow. I expect to see lots of traffic through the city, as well as a nightmare over at the Costco itself. And then just events coming up. The Christmas parade is on the 2nd, Saturday the 2nd at 5 o'clock, and tree lighting the night before on the 1st at 5:30. And the mayor has enlisted some help in lighting that tree. I'll let him announce that if he wants to. And then last of all is more personal in nature. My grandson, Hank William, is rolled into town from Denver, and we visited the fire station yesterday, and I want to thank Lieutenant Vandervoort for a great tour and super patience with a 16-year-old or 16-month-old. Hank had a wonderful time, and his parents were very thrilled that he got to do that. So thank you, fire department. My only expectation is the next time Hank rolls into town, PD is going to have to show him some police cars. Hopefully it will be not in the back of one, but he would love to see something from PD. So that's all I have.
Since he left the matter open. Last year, CEO at Venice Rideout lit the Christmas tree, and this year I was asked by Carrie Hauk, our public relations consultant, on who I thought we should do, and we went through a few names. And I've been, at public meetings, I've been making a point of noting the fact that we have excellent management leadership at all of the major institutions in our community. Here with Mr. Shedd, and he's truly excellent. Kevin Mallon over at the county, and Chris over at Venice Rideout, Willie at the Water Agency. There's just terrific executives. We're very fortunate to have that convergence of so many fine executives, because we've all seen in our lifetimes times when there weren't great executives and it was a problem. And one executive I've seen at the county who is, I consider her a high-performance executive. Everything I see her do is first rate. It's the community development director there, Rachel Downs. Not only is she a high-performance executive here in our community, she lives in Marysville and has children. And I thought it would be special to have her light the Christmas tree, and we'll see how that goes. I'm looking forward to seeing her and her family out there. Hope you all approve. Oh, and you did you mention that we got the plans for the, thank you, please.
In fact, I will yield the floor to Mr. Flores for some community development updates.
And you're referencing the plans for B Street, I believe?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, so we were very excited.
Plus you got some others you want to tell us about.
Oh, we have plenty of plans coming in, yeah. Several plans have come in actually the last several days.
Real plans?
Real plans on, yes, and I can go over those, but I won't bore you with a long list. But
we'll do
B
that
Street's
next
the
time.
highlight.
Save some. Make people want you to come back.
You got it, yeah. B Street's the highlight. We received the plans, and they were distributed to the appropriate agencies, including 4-Leaf, who will be reviewing their plans and providing comments for them. But we were very excited, and the plans look very good at the offset.
Now, that's for the hotel alone or for
That's
everything?
for the hotel, the drive-through restaurant, and a